Okay, so mixed opinions on this film. Let's see whether they remain mixed for our next film, where the whole "it's happening inside his head" thing is part and parcel of the whole film, and that's 2010's Source Code. Scott, give us a recap on that, please.
It's always a little disorientating waking up on a train, but particularly so if you wake up in a different country and month and body. Such is the case for Jake Gyllenhaal's Captain Coulter Stevens, whose last memory was flying a mission over Afghanistan, but he now appears to be inhabiting the body of a teacher, Sean Fentress, on a routine Chicago commute, talking with a prospective love interest, Michelle Monaghan's Christina Warren, but before he can get his bearings, the train blows up. It's always a little disorientating, waking up in a cockpit after being blown up on a train in a different country in month and body, etc., etc. This time, a suitably confused and agitated Stevens is talked down by Vera Farmiga's Captain Colleen Goodwin, whose briefing tells him that he's in a strange, continually vaguely defined experimental technology called Source Code, which is basically inserting him into the last 8 minutes of Sean Fentress's life. Whoever is behind that bombing is believed to have been on the train and has an even greater threat in the planning. So, Goodwin and the project's truculent creator, Jeffrey Wright's Dr. Rutledge, send Stevens back into the time loop again and again, not to stop the train exploding, but to identify the terrorist and report back. You see, even though it seems very much like an alternate timeline is being created every time Stevens is cycled through the source code, it isn't because, well, Rutledge says so. So there. Stevens doesn't quite believe him, perhaps motivated by finding out what really happened to him on his last mission in Afghanistan, and not wanting that state of affairs to continue. Now, I liked this a lot a decade ago, and it stands up pretty well today in terms of being a fun ride. Director Duncan Jones keeps things moving along at enough of a breakneck clip that you won't be stopping to think about it too hard, which is pretty much key to enjoying the endeavour. It's helped along by a strong turn from Gyllenhaal, who proves a sympathetic lead as he's pulled from pillar to post and back again at aforementioned breakneck speed, and he bounces well off Farmiga, Wright, and the somewhat underserved Christina Warren. No, that's the character's name. The somewhat underserved Michelle Monaghan. I'm not completely sure repeat viewing is Source Code's best friend. There's such an entirely understandable woolliness to all of the time travel shenanigans that simply can't be defined, either in relation to our own quotidian reality or the film's own internal logic, that would stop the film's happy ending from happening, which is something that I can give a pass to when viewing this as a fun, vaguely sci-fi flavoured thriller. But if you prefer your science fiction more on the science than the fiction side, then this will very much not be your jam. It's a touch sad that Duncan Jones's first feature, Moon, remains his best by a decent margin, but Source Code is by no means a disgrace to his name that Mute was, and I hold up some hope for his involvement in the hopefully still upcoming 2000 AD adaptations. Indeed, Source Code makes for an entertaining morsel to hold you over until that arrives. Yes, quite enjoyed revisiting this one, but it is probably not the kind of film that is best served by watching it repeatedly. Its internal logic, I think, is not particularly well defined enough to either hold together or fall apart. It's it seems to be an almost precision engineered to give you just enough information to get through the film, but without actually being able to go back and really pick it apart, because it doesn't really tell you anything one way or the other to really give you much of a basis on it. But yes, who cares? It's an enjoyable film, and it's a really enjoyable little, 90, 100 minutes, whatever it is, roller coaster ride. Yes.
I remember going to see this at the cinema with my wife and coming out thinking, yeah, that was pretty good, but I absolutely loathed the ending, which is just far too twee for its own good. And if I may just clear the floor for Drew, I have not returned to this film because I would have watched it tonight had I not forgotten we were recording tonight as opposed to tomorrow, which I had in my head. So I've got nothing to say about whether or not I still enjoy this film now. Over to you, Drew.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to, I'm trying not to swear on this, but I shall curse Scott, at least internally, for bringing up Mute, which I had forgotten existed. So, thanks for that, you bastard. Although, yeah, the biggest problem with Mute, apart from, what the hell was going on with Mute, it was just such a disappointment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this at the time. I've watched it a couple of times since. I really enjoyed it this time. The key with the film is probably, Scott, as you're saying, it's not to watch it repeatedly. Every now and then I'll do you fine. It's a really fun ride.
Yeah.
Bombs along. Like you, Craig, I'm not enormously fond of the ending. The problem is that it sort of stops being a sci-fi action film at that point, or sci-fi film at all, and sort of becomes a relationship drama-ish. It starts verging more towards that, although there's some touchy moments in there, particularly Jake Gyllenhaal's character's call with the uncredited Scott Bakula as his dad. And they even managed to get Scott Bakula saying, "Oh boy," Quantum Leap style, without it actually being Quantum Leap style. It's quite subtle, which I quite appreciated. Yeah, but it is a bit twee, that ending. It's salvaged a little by the fact that part of it does come back around to the sci-fi element of it, with the final message sent to Vera Farmiga's character through email. So there's a hint of like the sort of parallel realities thing there, that this is like more than just whatever Jeffrey Wright says it is, even if he doesn't know. But yeah, it's a bit twee, the relationship part of it. And also it does raise the question of, wait a minute, if that's Jake Gyllenhaal's character, if that's Coulter Stevens there, what happened to the person whose body is gotten when everybody else seems to be themselves? So, that brings up ethical issues. But yeah, other than that, I really enjoyed Jake Gyllenhaal's great. I've always liked him. And his character goes on quite a journey there. And you can, and it's actually that his character.
Yes, he's on a train.
Because he's. That just totally derailed me.
Stay on track, Drew. That's the ticket.
Oh,
Are you all desperately thinking about other more train puns?
I'm just trying to think where I was. I was considering doing that, but stopped because I genuinely can't remember where I was going.
Much like ScotRail.
The journey that Coulter Stevens is on, Jake Gyllenhaal's character. At the start, he's been quite like brusque with the people he's interacting with. He's assaulting people, but because he quite clearly doesn't believe that they're real, that the thing's real.
Yeah.
And the character changes, and he questions that guy with the beard to sit next to the ginger-haired student, and then when he realises it's not him, he's like, "Oh no, sorry." It's like there's subtle changes in like the script and the way he's speaking there. It's like, oh right, yeah, because he's realising these are real people.
Yeah, that's the training kicking in.
And then the concept of the structure works quite well too. They set up this. I mean, the science is nonsense. Actually, the science in Repo Man is considerably stronger.
Yeah,
the science here.
Yeah, the science stroke magic.
And not in a any sufficiently advanced technology sort of way. No, just actual magic. But yeah, it works out with they set that it's this 8-minute cycle. So that actually structurally is quite a good length of time, because you can have a few things that play out in real time without it feeling like it's dragging. Then you can sort of jump around within the 8 minutes without feeling like it's just been unnecessarily sped up. Or you could maybe like you've got one section of 8 minutes on a train where you might think, actually, was that actually 8 minutes in real time? It may have been, and not know. And it helps with the pacing really well, without ever feeling like you're just constantly repeating stuff, or that lots has been skipped over or sped up. So that 8 minutes actually works really well for the film's structure, as well as giving dramatic impetus. So I think that the actual structure of the film, I think, works really well. Where it falls down on a bit is like magic. It's nonsensical, but it's Quentin. It's an interesting idea, even though it's got no basis in reality at all. I don't really have a lot more to say. I enjoy it. It's a well-made film. It's a well-acted film. It is nonsense, clearly, but it's very enjoyable nonsense. The score's perhaps a little bombastic at times. I don't hugely care for the score in it. Particularly when it's like the very, very dramatic piece of music being played in the bit where Jake Gyllenhaal's desperately trying to contact him, and he's trapped in his pod or whatever this environment he's imagining himself to be in is, and he's getting quite close to death, and it's just this pounding, dramatic, completely over the top and bombastic score playing. It doesn't really seem to suit the scene. because it felt more action movie like, and it's not really an action movie in that way.
Yeah, certainly not that scene, which could have probably benefited more from complete silence
Yeah,
rather than
certainly
score,
something more subtle.
Yeah.
And it's not because there are some actually nice subtle bits, like at least the first couple of times, and I didn't notice it later, but I was listening for it, I didn't notice it, so they maybe dropped it, or maybe I just wasn't hearing it, but the first couple of times when Vera Farmiga was talking to Coulter Stevens, particularly the first time when he doesn't know who he is before she uses the little memory training thing she has, in the surround channels, there's this quite subtle but quite insistent heartbeat that's that matches his stress levels, and it comes and goes and speeds up and slows down as he's getting stressed. Just played in the rear channels, and it's like quite nicely done. It's not overpowering. It's totally odds with that completely over top bit of music later.
Right.
So I find that kind of frustrating. So you've done it so well in some bits of the film. Why isn't it more consistent? That's like kind of minor issues, though. The meat of it is very enjoyable, but it's not something I think you could watch repeatedly. Yeah, give it a good few years apart. Let the worst sins kind of wash out of your mind. Go back, enjoy the performances and the action, and then give it another 7 or 8 years before you watch it again.
Yes.
I'm going to watch it every 8 minutes.